A grand jury. They got a grand jury to indict that guy with no evidence at all.
When you have a situation where you can basically present a false reality,
yeah,
and there's no counter to it, which is the way grand juries are set up. Yeah, I mean, the prosecution presents their case, and if it's a case that's a false reality, then that's what you're, in all likelihood, that's what you're going to get. But we've got an administration that is helmed by a man who is very accustomed to and has been very successful at, distorting reality, bending reality, creating false realities, and marketing it successfully enough that, a sizable number of people have gone along with it.
Alrighty, welcome in. It is your favorite political podcast. It's Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, Dave?
I am feeling good, man. How about you?
Well, it's going great here. I looked at the weather for the next few days, and it is supposed to exceed 100 degrees a few days, and man, that is just feeling right. It feels so good outside. It feels so good. So yeah, I'm happy, man. I'm happy with the way things are going. So, hey, before we get going here and talk about some of the stuff that happened over the weekend and last week and this week and the whole deal, let me tell you about our friends over at Wind Creek Entertainment. They make this thing go along. We really appreciate them for their sponsorship and what they do for us and what they do for the rest of the state. They operate 3 fantastic casino resort locations around the state, but in addition to that, they are also great folks, and they operate a number of businesses. They're the state's #1 hospitality employer. They run things like, I mean, if you go to one of these casino resorts, right, it really is a different experience, from the way you're treated, the professionalism, the way everything is put together, how nice the rooms are, how nice the amenities are, the way the staff responds to you. And first of all, you've got everybody there. We talked about this last week. Everybody there has worked there for years, because, it's a great place to work, and they're great people to work for. And so that in and of itself lets you know that this is a high quality establishment, and we really do appreciate them for what they do for us and sponsoring this program, because it is Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment, and we so appreciate them for that and for everything else they do, giving to the churches and the schools and the cities and the communities, and helping to build out roads and helping to build out water infrastructure. I mean, the whole deal is they're great neighbors and friends. So check them out online at Wind Creek Entertainment. Book a room. Coming up on Labor Day, you got a couple more weekends left of going to the beach back and forth. Get the kids out of school at 3:00 on a Friday. Head down. Don't drive the whole way. Stop and stay somewhere. Stay at one of the resorts and break up the trip. Get down there early Saturday morning. Have yourself a good time at the beach. All right. We got a new chair, a new vice chair of the Alabama Democratic Party. I went to the meeting, hung out with the Democrats for a while on Saturday. I gotta say, it gave me a lot of hope for the party, and I don't say that simply because there's new leadership at the top. It's not that I like, look, we've said before, I've disagreed. God knows people have heard our interviews. And so, I've disagreed a lot with Randy Kelly. Okay. So, and I've disagreed with Joe Reed. I have a ton of respect for Joe Reed. I have respect for Randy Kelly as well, but I have a lot of respect for Joe Reed and what he's done for the state, for what he did for Montgomery, what he has done for just people and civil rights. Okay, he's one of those civil rights heroes, and that's the way I think of him. It's not that people voted against him. okay, or voted against Randy Kelly. They voted for Bobby Singleton. And that, I think, was the prevailing difference between what took place Saturday and what has taken place in the past. This was not a vote of animosity. This was not a vote of overthrowing somebody, of taking over the party. We're taking over the party. It was not that. It was that's the way Bobby Singleton presented it. That's the way I felt like most people in the room took it, and the way they based their votes among the SDEC members. And because I know some of those folks were previously very loyal to Dr. Reed and Randy Kelly with their votes. A lot of those people were. And, I know from the conversations I had with many of them in the days leading up to the vote and on Saturday, that they just felt like this was the direction that the party needed to go. That Bobby brought a lot of energy. He brought a plan. He had a plan of action. He was going to be able to connect with a lot of different people that had not been talked to in a number of years. They, to be fair, they also felt that Randy Kelly had failed them on certain degrees, having only visited, I think they said 13 of the 67 counties, not really engaging the chairs.
Wait, who said that? Who said that he'd only visited 13?
That was one of the things that they that had gone around at the party, and someone asked them about that, and there was no pushback.
Oh wow, okay,
and so I think that's true. So, and regardless whether it was 13 or 15 or whatever, that was something that you heard from a lot of county chairs, was that Randy Kelly has not been engaged with us. The party has not been engaged with us. And
so do you think they went there with the idea that Randy Kelly is just not, no matter what Bobby Singleton says or doesn't say, Randy Kelly just hadn't done the best job? Is that what you're saying? That they entered the room with that?
I don't necessarily think so. I think it was, I really do think it was a combination of things. I think that they felt like that Randy had not done a very good job, and that Bobby had a better plan, that he had called them, that he had talked to them, that he had a plan to visit every single county in the next 30 days. He was going to go around and talk to everybody, and make sure that he had visited with everybody, all of these county chairs, to help to see what they need, and put together a plan, an organizational plan where they all work togetger. And I think
but I guess what I'm trying to ask you though is, do you think walking in other words, was the vote decided after hearing both Randy Kelly and Bobby Singleton, or was the vote already kind of decided
it was decided,
when they walked in the room?
Yeah, it was decided before they walked in the room. I think everybody walking in knew Bobby was going to win. I knew walking in that Bobby was going to win. And I did not. I said before, I'll never count out Joe Reed in Montgomery. And so I held that reservation with it, but, I knew that Bobby was going to win, and I did not expect it to be by 100 some odd votes, which it was 165 to 62 or somewhere right along in those lines.
Yeah, it was decisive. I mean,
it was very decisive, votes, and in the room it looked even more so. It looked. Honestly, I kind of question where 60 votes came from, because they raised the cards up so you can count them yourself, and I got to into the high 30s, and so.
Oh, really?
But
okay,
yeah, but whatever, they were trained counters up there taking care of all that, so it didn't matter at the end. It just, when the hands went up for Bobby, it was overwhelming. And, and like I said, I think a lot of people were very, very happy with the result, but it was not, again, it didn't feel the same as 2019 did. You know what I mean? It wasn't that, the vitriolic sort of thing. There was no hatefulness. Randy Kelly and Bobby Singleton hugged after it was over with. And it just was different. And I think that's what's most important out of this. I think Joe Reed is going to support Bobby Singleton. You're not going to have the same lawsuits and, fighting and letters going out to everybody. And I think that with his support, also the ADC is going to support Bobby Singleton. And that is a very important thing. I know a lot of the membership of the ADC is getting older. And they have not replaced them with younger folks, not nearly enough. But still, it's a very important group of people, and it's a very important label within the Alabama Democratic Party to know that the Black Caucus is supportive of you. And honestly, I think that this could be a pretty good thing for the ADC as well. To remove that kind of us versus them type thing that has gone on for a while. Go ahead.
So what about Caroline? What about Caroline Self? Did you feel like it was a foregone conclusion that she was going to win also?
No, I didn't. I did not. But then again, not as much is put, not as much emphasis is put on the vice chair. But in that one, I didn't know she was going to win. I felt pretty sure she would, just because I know, Bobby had nominated her. I felt like that was important message to people that, hey, this is the person I want to work with, in this role. I also know that during the weeks leading up to it, both Bobby and Anthony Daniels had supported her when going around talking to people. And those two people carry a lot of weight. They've raised a ton of money for people, over the years, to help out other folks' campaigns. And so I think that those things kind of working together, gave her a leg up. But I don't want to also now, don't let me diminish what Caroline is done. She's worked within the party. She's been there for a long time. She has, Blueprint Alabama is her baby. You've seen them online, their videos and stuff. She has done a really, really good job. She came up with this social media plan for the House Democratic Caucus, this last session. And those videos were getting just a ton of views. And all of a sudden, I think that's one of the things that has helped lead to, a bigger positive image of Democrats over the last year, is what she's done and what she's been able to spread around there. So I don't want to in any way diminish her qualifications. But, I think that having those two folks supporting her helped, but they don't support her unless she's good at her job. And she's been very, very good at her job. We both know Anthony Daniels, and he does not suffer foolish, lazy people very, very well.
Right.
And Caroline is neither of those things. She's very smart and very capable. And I think that she restores a lot of faith as well, that some things are going to get done from an outreach standpoint, from a media messaging standpoint, that people have not seen before. And I poked a little fun of it in the column that I wrote about this thing, but this 2026, the leadership of the party should not be sending out letters to people, as their main form of communication. A letter is fine. A letter is fine occasionally to folks, but that should not be your primary form of communication. The person leading things should have an email address that they use at the very least. There should be regularly updated social media accounts. There should be videos. There should be messaging that goes out. There should be a way to communicate with everybody. Things have not gone well. Okay. Things have not gone well. And I think that's fair to say, to these folks.
No, it's self-evident. I don't even know that fairness is really so much the issue as, how can you dispute it? We've had lawsuits, we've had public fighting. I don't care whose side you're on. I don't think anybody on any side can say things have gone great. They haven't.
No. And I just think from a management standpoint of the party, it's just been severely lacking. And I think that when you hear that from some people, you go, yeah, all right, they got an axe to grind. But when you hear that from so many people who are newcomers, who don't have any real dog in that whole, Doug Jones versus Joe Reed fight, who don't know Randy Kelly, who don't know, these other people and these other, when you hear like, hey man, I can't get a call back from these people, or, hey, they've not, they're not really helping me with my campaign, or, things that just go on that you just shake your head at. And, I think people realize that. And so, when Bobby Singleton entered this race and he started calling around and talking to people and telling them his ideas for the future, what he was going to do, who he was going to work with, how he was going to work it, what his focuses were going to be, I think it really resonated with people, even those who had been historically inclined to go, on the Joe Reed side of things. I think they looked at it, and I think a lot of those people held conversations with Dr. Reed over the course of the last week or so and said, hey, we're gonna have to vote for Bobby on this because he's the better candidate and he's got the better vision for the party.
Well, I guess what surprises me, and of course, I wasn't there on Saturday, but what surprised me was that black Democrats broke from Joe Reed to the extent that they apparently did. I was surprised by that because I know that there is a race has been a real indisputable backdrop for a lot of what's been going on in the Democratic Party, and I think you can be on either side of the issue and see that, and there are people who will, on either side of the issue who will look at the other side and say, well, they're using race. I mean, so even just for that alone, with that alone, I think it's been a very much a factor. So when you see things divided along a racial line, what tends to happen is, at least speaking as a black person, what we tend to do is we tend to coalesce. We tend to come together and unify. And I think, and we don't talk about this maybe enough in our society, but there is a deeply rooted, historically based suspicion of whites in our community when certain things happen. And I think it's very justified.
No,
now, having said that, that's not to indict all white people, not by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it's important to note that, there are white people who literally sacrificed their lives for black people during the Jim Crow and civil rights era. I mean, from, Reverend Jonathan Daniels to Viola Liuzzo to William Moore. I mean, we can name names. I mean, the two Jewish brothers in Mississippi, Anthony Goodman or Andy Goodman, I'm sorry, and Michael Schwerner. I mean, we can name names. So this is not an indictment of all white people, but I think these are realities. They are sociological, historically based realities. So I was really surprised to see that break. And I know you might say, well, they broke, for a black man, but I think it's deeper. I think it's more complicated than that. I don't know that they just broke for a black man. I think there was, as you said, they made a value judgment and decided to go in a certain direction because they thought it was in the best interest of the party. But I'm really surprised that they did that. I'm glad they did it because I think we needed to change. There needed to be a change. Now you can, and that's not, to me, that's just a recognition. That's not an indictment of Reverend Randy Kelly or Joe Reed necessarily, because I think, just like you expressed a lot of respect for Joe Reed, and I have a lot of respect for him too, I also have a lot of respect for Randy Kelly. I've seen how he has moved in this community in Madison County, where he was a pastor for many years, and I have respect for what he did in this community. But I think by any honest assessment, you cannot dispute the fact that things weren't working. And if things aren't working, voting back in the same people is not the way to get them to work all of a sudden.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree. I don't mean to dismiss anything that Randy Kelly has done. I just don't
Yeah.
know him as well as I know Joe Reed and
Yeah,
Joe Reed's
I know
history.
that. Yeah.
And so I don't want to diminish anything
Yeah,
that
you
Randy
and Joe
Kelly has
Reed
done.
actually are friends.
Well,
At least that's what it sounds
yeah.
like to me.
No,
When we've talked not just on the air, but or on the podcast, but off the podcast, I get the feeling you guys have a true, you have a true connection as friends.
Well, we started out as frenemies, I would say.
Oh, really? Okay.
And when I was covering
Okay.
them when he was on the board of trustees at ASU, and that's how the relationship started. And then I got to know Stephen very well, and and then in talking to Dr. Reed, and I think Dr. Reed appreciated that I always tried to treat him fairly. Even when he was, the villain, in the stories at ASU, and I think he took some glee in being the villain at ASU, if we're honest about things. But I do, But that aside, I think Bobby was the perfect candidate for this time. To do what you're talking about, because if you think back to all of the things that have gone on, Bobby has not been involved in any of them. He's not been involved in any of the fighting. He never took a side. He never got involved.
Key point.
Yeah.
That's a very important point.
Yeah.
Extremely.
He never got involved on either side. He was he was never this pro Doug Jones guy over here. He was never he never got in. He always remained above the fray to a certain extent. And to a large extent, so did Anthony Daniels. They never got bogged down in that bickering in things. And so, I think that played a big role in this. And in addition to the fact, Bobby has been around for 20 some odd years. He's been through a lot of fights. He's fought for a lot of people, a lot of black folks, in bad situations. He's carried legislation and fought on the floor and, carried out sermons, in which he just made these white people in the legislature look like fools. He's done all these things, but he also was not their enemy at any point.
It wasn't like the late Alvin Holmes, who I think had, and God bless him, God bless his legacy, but he seemed to be more openly, at least my recollection is, he seemed to have more open antagonism, and at least, I don't get that read from Bobby Singleton.
Oh man, we had this conversation the other day about Alvin Holmes, and I wish, man, there were some voicemails that I got from Alvin. Oh my God!
Now, and I'm not saying that as a critic of him overall, because I actually liked him. I had him on my radio show a bunch of times. Back when I was doing that 15 years ago or whatever it was. He was a great guest. I thought he was colorful. I thought he was candid, even if it was abrasively so or antagonistically so. I thought he was candid. And I also thought he was, very savvy as a politician. But they're also, again, and I think, when we're talking about people, and this has been one of my points too about Joe Reed in particular, that I've tried to say, especially to white Democrats, when you're dealing with a black man of a certain age, you're going to, in all likelihood, you're going to get, somebody who has extremely strong feelings about, especially issues that involve race and politics because of what they've lived through. And you got to respect that. You got to respect what they've lived through, and understand that what they have lived through, contributes to who they are today and how they see the world today. So you may not agree with how they see the world, or you may not agree with their tactics, but you've got to respect what led them to this point and understand that it is valid. They lived through freaking Jim Crow.
Yeah.
They lived through a freaking segregated Alabama. They lived through a time where lynchings were prevalent, where it was literally a life or death, experience to simply walk the streets.
Yes.
Of this country in so many places, and especially in the Deep South.
Oh, it's man, oh God, what you said is, it always amazes, whenever I stop and seriously think about it, whenever I'm in Montgomery and I drive past, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, or I drive by the old King House, or drive by the old house where the Gretzes lived, or any of those places, and you think about the number of bombs, literal bombs that went off in that city in a 10 to 15 year period. I mean, it was. The Gratzes, there was a white pastor and his wife with 3 kids in the house. Their house was bombed 4 times for driving people during the bus boycott. Okay?
Wow.
All right? They were bombed 4 times. They threw one bomb that didn't go off that would have taken out the entire block, the police told them. But it didn't go off. They came back and threw a second bomb to try to make the first bomb go off, and that didn't work. That bomb blew up, but it didn't blow up the first one. And it just, they were asleep inside with their 2-year-old.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so, they eventually, but quick story about where you live. They eventually found those people who did that bombing. They were members of the KKK who had driven over and had committed that bombing, had a list of the houses they were going to bomb that night. At Fred Shuttlesworth's house on there, that they skipped so they could come back and throw the second bomb at the Gratz's house. Caught them.
Wow.
One of the people went to court. Of course, they were acquitted by an all-white jury. One of those men later became a bail bondsman and owned a bail bondsman place in Montgomery for years. Later in life, the Gratzes came back to Montgomery after moving away, and Reverend Gratz went over to that bail bondsman and said, "Hey, I know you did this. I want you to know that I've forgiven you a long time ago, and I would like for us to be, have a cordial relationship." Kicked him out, never spoke to him again. Yeah. So that's what you dealt with a lot. Okay, there. And so, you're 100% right on this, and on what folks faced, and and where they come from, and the fighting attitude that they have about things, and that fighting spirit that people get so irritated with Joe Reed about. Man, he didn't come by that naturally. That was built in him.
Right.
Right.
He had to have it to survive.
Exactly, he did. Yeah. Exactly, he did. And and he figured out how to survive, and how to make his way, and how to do things. And you can knock him all you want, and there have been plenty of people who've knocked him. I've knocked him myself from time to time. But the man deserves respect for what he's done and what he's endured, and how he's fought for himself and for other people. If he just fought for himself through those situations, it would be enough. But he's fought for others as well.
That's right.
And so that deserves respect all the way up and down. Now, I just think that the way Bobby came in and was not involved in that fight, plus the way he handled things. He called Joe Reed. He called Randy Kelly. He told both of them, "I'm going to run for this. I'm not running against you. I'm not asking for your permission either, but I'm running to lead this party because I think I have a better way of doing things." They did not like it. Joe told him he wished he wouldn't do that. But to do whatever. Bobby said, "Look, I'm not going to fight with you. I'm not going to turn this personal. I would appreciate it if you didn't either." Neither of them did that. And I think that makes a huge difference in what took place on Saturday. And that's why I think so many people, those two reasons, Bobby hadn't been involved in this, so they saw him as somebody who was neutral. So they weren't voting against Joe Reed. They were voting for what they saw as a better pathway for the party. And then when Bobby got stood up to talk on Saturday, I think it just reconfirmed everything. Randy had given his speech and it was, what he had done over the last 4 years and what he had faced and all this. And then, Bobby essentially ran a revival in there. How you doing, Democrats? Oh, and it was, and they were off and running, and and it changed the whole tone of that meeting, and it, I think, is a tone changer for the party itself. And I will help him in any way, because as we've said many times here, we've got to get back to a two-party, or we've got to get to a two-party state. I don't know that we've ever been one, except for a brief period, maybe in the late 90s or so, where the Republicans were coming up, and they, there had to be some compromise in there. But I feel like if we can get to a two-party system on things and force folks to talk and compromise, we're going to be a whole hell of a lot better off as a state.
Yep.
So. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Hey, by the way, you like my shirt? I got this week.
Jackie Robinson.
It's a Jackie Robinson, man. And the reason I got it was not so much the front, but on the back, it's got a great quote about a life is only important in the impact it has on other lives. Is that not a great quote? I love it. Yeah.
He was a great man. He was a great man. And by the way, since we're talking about Jackie Robinson, if you haven't seen 42, the movie about his life starring the late, great Chadwick Boseman, it is a great movie to watch. It is entertaining, and it's informative. It's inspiring. I mean, I love that movie. And I've been a Jackie Robinson fan since I was a kid. But Chadwick Boseman just highlighted his life in such a great way that it just made my fandom even that more, real and wonderful to experience. I mean, just what a great performance by Chadwick Boseman.
It was a really great movie. It's impossible to completely appreciate the animosity and things that Jackie Robinson endured, and why. I mean, it's just for somebody who like me, it just has always been the race thing has always been so stupid. It's always been. I mean, it's like being mad at somebody. That's what I tell my daughter all the time. It's like being mad at somebody because of the color of their hair. You're like, you would think, how stupid. Yeah. Well, I hate blonde people. What? You know how dumb that sounds? I mean, really, you know how stupid that sounds? And it's the same exact thing. And it's so ignorant. But, but our thanks to all of those folks. Also, our thanks to the folks at Wind Creek Entertainment for sponsoring. Our thanks to the folks at the SPLC for sponsoring, and for making sure that we get good guests like Rachel on. It was really the work that they do is top notch, and I really look forward to them that lawsuit against the criminal charges being tossed out. Because it's
bogus,
complete bullshit.
It's bogus.
I really wish that they would let me report some of the things that I know about this, and talk to some of the people who I know from over there from a long time ago, and oh God, it's just it would make them look so foolish at the Department of Justice for pursuing this nonsense, and I bet future people at the Department of Justice are really going to be upset with these folks for screwing up their records on convictions and cases that they bring, because this is you're not winning this. You're not winning this. It's like the case they brought against.
I don't see how.
By the way, the case that they brought against the former Olympian for tearing up the reflecting pool, which was complete
foolishness.
Eugene Pirro is now booted this thing, much to the chagrin of Donald Trump and all these other moronic Republicans who jumped on this thing and said we're convinced that somebody had done this, even though everybody around looked at it and said there's no way anybody did this. It was shoddy workmanship, and everybody knew that. But this idea that a grand jury indicted that guy. They got a grand jury to indict that guy with no evidence at all.
Well, it's what they say, right? A prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. That's the old saying. I mean, it's when you have a situation where you can basically present a false reality,
Yeah.
And there's no counter to it, which is the way grand juries are set up. Yeah, I mean, the prosecution presents their case, and if it's a case that's a false reality, then that's what you're, in all likelihood, that's what you're going to get. But we've got an administration that is helmed by a man who is very accustomed to and has been very successful at, distorting reality, bending reality, creating false realities, and marketing it successfully enough that a sizable number of people have gone along with it. I think we're beginning to see a decline now. I think we're beginning to see people who are really coming to realize that the current president, operates first and foremost with his own wants and needs taking precedent over anything and anybody else. Case in point, Josh, is this whole thing with the airplane and the belief that Iran was going to try to assassinate him, I guess, by blowing up the plane. Mm-hmm. And so, they, as they should, the Secret Service absolutely should have protected the president. We don't want, I disagree with the president on everything, but I don't want to see the president blown up.
No.
I don't want to see that happen to him. I don't want to see that happen to our nation, because that would be a tragedy for our nation because of the office and what the office represents. But they concocted a plan, as they should have, to get Trump off of the plane and into another plane. They used some diversionary tactics and whatever else they did. But then they
put him
left.
in a dining cart, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding, that they put him in some kind of a dining cart or something, to transport him from one aircraft to another. But then my understanding is they left the people, the press corps and staff members on that same plane and let them travel on in it. And I'm thinking, really? Nobody thought, after we get the president safe, which they absolutely should have, we need to do something to make sure that if there is an attack, that the people on that plane, at least that they have the option to choose whether or not they're going to stay on the plane or not. They didn't even, it doesn't seem as though they did that.
No. I mean, the whole point of the press corps is to travel with the president. Now, I'm not saying that they should have put him on, that they should have taken the press corps off and let him travel with the president. I'm not saying that at all. But if he's not on the plane, you should at least come back on there and say, hey, listen, we've had to take some measures. Okay.
Yes.
And we need to, you can now get your own, you can stay on this plane or you can get your own flights. But we feel like there's a safety, issue in terms of, a threat made against the safety of this aircraft. Would you like to get your own flight out of here? To which
we'll
I think I would have called my whatever publication I was working for and been like, hey, listen, we're taking a flight out of here on Billy Bob's Airlines, and I'm getting out of here in a different way, because this is we can't have this. I know, and really Trump was going to be a right wing nut for that and for the reflecting pool issue and for any number of other things that he does, but really for those two things this week. And because you're right, you look at what was taking place there. You left them, and maybe I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So maybe there's a protocol of a level of seriousness in which they think there could be something, and but it's unlikely. And so, but the president still has to go a different way, to make sure he's 100% protected. I don't know. But
bro, even if there is such a protocol, the way I see it, if they had any reason to believe that Trump needed to be removed, then everybody else should have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way I see it. I don't understand how you rationalize it. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about them. I don't know how they rationalize it any other way. Because to me, you're basically saying we're going to roll the dice on whether or not this is going to happen. And we're rolling the dice on these people's lives.
Right.
I just don't understand that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't either. I don't know. It's a but I don't understand a lot of what goes on with the Trump administration and the way they handle things. One thing I did want to bring up before we slide out of here. We talked a lot about Joe Reed in the Open, and then some with Carolina as well. Alabama State University, under the leadership of Quentin Ross, restored Joe Reed's name back to the Acadome. It was removed, I want to say, in 2009, after a lot of turmoil and a lot of bad things happened. And look, I'm not going to excuse away everybody's behavior, and that includes Joe Reed's in that. Okay, those people didn't remove his name from that building just because they didn't like the suits he wore. Okay. There was some cause for what they did. Now, I and some others, and I think Quentin Ross also felt this way. He was not president at the time. He didn't come in until several years later. And so, he didn't have any stake in that fight. But, I felt like taking his name off of the Acadome, while it hurt him tremendously, which was the goal of doing so. I felt like it was a step too far.
Well, what was I mean, I'll be very honest with you. I don't remember.
Right.
What was the reason? Why? What was the justification? What had he done that they thought warranted that?
All right. So, so it started. So when my first job out of college, while I was still in college, I started working for the Advertiser. And it was basically I started out as a stringer on Friday nights, taking phone calls and putting football scores in the paper, doing little recaps and putting in the high school football scores. And from that, I graduated. And just a week or so after I graduated, the person who was covering ASU was let go. There was some sort of separation there, and it was right at the start of football season. And so I jumped in and started covering ASU athletics. They hired me right then. That was my, you want to talk about jumping into some fire. So I came in, and at the time, the head coach there was L.C. Cole. L.C. Cole had just been hired the year previous by the folks that were in charge, and there had been a changeover in control of the university's board. All right. And there have always been these different factions. This will sound very familiar to those who followed the Democratic Party. Joe Reed on one side, some other folks on, Donald Watkins and some other people on the other side. And the other side had gained control of the board, and they had fired the old head coach and had brought in L.C. Cole, who had at that time had been at Tennessee State. He had run into some NCAA trouble up there, fairly minor stuff. It wasn't that big a deal. But come in and they pretty quickly turned the football program around at ASU. They were doing pretty well. So the year after I started covering them, there all of a sudden was these allegations of NCAA violations and this crazy letter about these things that had been alleged to have taken place. Over the course of a number of weeks and months and years of reporting on this thing, it basically came out that there was really a conspiracy within the university to fire L.C. Cole and do so by manufacturing NCAA violations against him. These lists of violations were ridiculous. And it started a fight at that point that snowballed into some real detrimental actions that took place that really hurt the athletic department at ASU, set them back for a long time. There were some other things. Board meetings were insane at that time. I mean, everybody covered these things, and there was one time where a board member had been seated by the governor, and Joe Reed and his group refused to recognize this person, to the point where this man at the board meeting would start speaking and they would ignore him. I mean, literally ignore him while he was talking and just continue talking about other business as though that man was not talking. they had him removed by security at one point. There were so many lawsuits.
So it was a contentious because of board contention. That's why they took his name off the dome.
Well, what their reasoning was that he had done harm to the university through his actions against the athletic department and through his various lawsuits that he had filed over the course of time. Now, and in saying that, there's a caveat in this. Most of the time, Joe Reed did not file the lawsuits, but a lot of the people who did file lawsuits were mysteriously represented by very, very well-known and very expensive attorneys who also happened to be working for the Alabama Education Association.
Okay.
So you see, there were. So what I'm saying is there was a long and tortured sort of period of time there. This NCAA investigation went on for like 8 years.
Wow.
I mean, it was ridiculous. And eventually they leveled some allegations and they were nothing like what they had started with. And I mean, it was just so stupid, but it really did harm the athletic department and the football program and caused some real damage. And then there was this whole other thing that went down outside of that. So my point is, yes, there was some contentiousness on both sides and both sides did some bad things. But I think that you could find a lot of people who would agree with you that Joe Reed did some things that were over the line, that were some things that were way over the line.
Okay.
But that said, I don't think it warranted removing his name from that. Okay, I think the work that he put in to get the Acadome funded as he did, that should have been above that. He put his name on there for a reason, and the reason was he was behind getting that facility built, and it was, but it's restored now. To me, that's good leadership by Quentin Ross, who has not always seen eye to eye with Joe Reed himself. Now, they've not always been on the same side either, but I think he recognized that it's something that needed to take place, and I'll say what I think was very important about this was he did it while Joe Reed was still alive. It's something he can still share with his sons and his family. And I think that means a lot to Joe Reed. And I think that means a lot to Stephen Reed and to Joey Reed and to their sister. And I just think that I think that it was a tremendous olive branch to put an end to that fight as well as the Democratic one, apparently, that has maybe been put to bed as well. And I was happy to see it. Because Joe Reed has meant a ton to ASU, no matter what the bad feelings were there for a period of time. He meant a ton to that university. And I again think it speaks very highly of the leadership of Quentin Ross as well. And the Board of Trustees who voted unanimously for it and approved it. So it's back up.
Good for Dr. Reed.
Yes, it's back up. Joe L. Reed, Dunn, Oliver, Acadome, by the way, Dunn and Oliver still deserve that as well. Those are some great coaches over there as well. So, hey, as far as I know, that's all we got. So let's get ourselves out of here until next week. Y'all be safe out there.
Peace.